Hi, and welcome to Code Corner. This is a video series we do at Mayfield Renewables where we talk about codes and standards as they relate to the solar and solar plus storage industries. Today I'm going to focus in on International Fire Code and specifically looking at 1207.8.1 and remote outdoor locations. We'll talk a little bit about outdoor locations in general, but then in this video really focus in on remote locations, and in other videos we'll talk about the locations that are close to exposures and outdoor wall installations. So we'll kind of go through all of these, but in this video really this is about those remote locations and what our rules and regulations are around those installations. So if we jump right into it and look at the charging language or the front language of 1207.8, 8 is all about outdoor installations. And really it's just saying, hey, we have to be in compliance with 8.1 through .8.3. And then it talks about these exterior wall locations. And so again, I'll do a video on that one specifically because it is a little bit unique. It's a little different than what other non-residential applications look like, and so I'll kind of bring attention to that when we do that video as well. But just understand that we do have to consider these different outdoor locations, and specifically, on or off of buildings. So you see 8.1 through 8.4 there, our subsections, and we're going to first define remote installations and installations near exposures. And then we'll talk about kind of what these clearances look like and how to apply the tables in 1207.8. So first, let's talk about what is a remote installation, what is an installation near exposures. So you can see there's a table 1207.8. We're going to look at that next. So if you have your IFC, you can look at that as well and see that table, how it's laid out. I will show it to you here in a second just so you get that feel for it. But for the purpose of 1207.8, and it's going to tell us which code sections apply for different locations. If we are going to consider our installation a remote location, we have to be more than 100 feet from buildings, lot lines, public ways, these hazards, these potential things that could, if there was a fire specifically, that we are more than 100 feet from things that could either be things that could catch on fire, or things like lot lines or buildings or other things where people may be congregating. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to isolate our energy storage systems, put it in a location where people are not going to be exposed to hazards, other components, other things would not be exposed to these hazards, and making it a relatively safe situation for people to navigate around and be able to get themselves away from any sort of issue that was at hand. So 100 feet is kind of that number, and I'll show you that in terms of an image here towards the end. Installations near exposures are pretty much anything other than that. And so if you are closer than 100 feet to a building, or if you are closer than 100 feet from a lot line, or if you have some exposed hazards, then that would be considered installation near exposures. I do want to go backwards up into that remote outdoor installations definition and point out that those last few words there. It talks about other exposure hazards. So code making officials recognizing, hey, we can't identify every single thing at every location, have this kind of catch-all phrase here. So making sure that if you are trying to apply this remote outdoor installation section and you do have some things that are within that 100 feet, you might want to be talking to your AHJ, your fire official, and making sure, hey, are you considering this an exposure hazard? And if it's a non-combustible, non-reactive type thing, I would say that you have a good reason to say that's not an exposure hazard. We're not actually, there's nothing at risk. Maybe people aren't congregating there, or maybe it's a inert kind of situation. But it's in there, and it's there very purposefully, just because, again, we can't predict all of the different things that are going to be at these installations. So just keep that in mind, that the remote outdoor installations, you may have to be looking at all of everything that's around there and being able to talk to your fire official about it. All right, so let's take a look at that table. And this was what was referenced when we were looking at that definition of remote installations. And this is a table we've shown in other videos and other of our presentations. So if you've seen those before, this will look familiar to you. This is straight out of the IFC, and it's just a nice table to reference where you are installing things. So you see that remote installations and installations near exposures on the right-hand side of the table. And it's just a cross-reference over on the left-hand side to the different code sections that would apply. So really what we have to do is first define, are we in a remote location or are we in a near an exposure? And a quick look at the table, what you'll notice is remote installations, if you kind of scroll down through there, everything's a yes with the exception of 2 items that we have no's for, and those are the maximum allowable quantities and the size and separation requirements. If you are an installation near an exposure, then you see it's just yeses down the line, so you're going to be applying all of those. So going back and looking at remote installations, you'll see maximum allowable quantities, size and separation, it says no. And we've done videos on both of those topics as well. So there's information that we put out there, and you can go look at the code language and we talk through both of those. But really what this means is maximum allowable quantities, that is the aggregated amount of storage you have in these different fire areas. And 600 kilowatt hours is kind of that magic number, if you will, where if you exceed 600 kilowatt hours, you have to go through these hazard mitigation analysis. You have extra steps you have to go do. What this is saying is if you're in a remote location, then the maximum allowable quantity is that portion of the code is not going to apply here. So you would be able to avoid those requirements. Size and separation, just the same way. Size and separation, size of our units, and the separation of those individual units from each other is what that is kind of shorthand for. So if you've looked at this before, or if you watched our other videos, 50 kilowatt hours is the maximum size of a unit that you can use without going through additional or showing additional testing. And then the separation is 3 feet for each of those units to be spaced 3 feet apart. So there are exceptions for both of those. And, we again talked about that in previous videos. But if you are in a remote installation location, then you don't have to apply, or the size and separations aren't going to apply for you. So again, it's probably a very difficult thing to be 100 feet from basically anything. Those locations are out there, and yes, I know you can do them. So just keep in mind that you get a little bit of leniency, I guess you could say, for those installations. And then finally, just kind of wanted to show a little bit more visually on what we're talking about. So you can see here, if we have our energy storage systems in the middle of this plot and we're 100 feet from everything, those units, so we're showing 4 different units in there, there's no size limitation on those units. That we can go to whatever size we want in terms of kilowatt hours. The spacing of those does not have to be the 3-foot spacing per code, and then also that 600 kilowatt aggregate, so we could have more than 600 kilowatts out there because we are in this remote location. So that's just kind of the a visual representation of what we've been talking about with these remote installation requirements. All right, so that's going to do it for that section of 1207. We have lots of other videos on 1207 and outdoor installations and kind of those general requirements. So I encourage you to take a look at those. I also encourage you to take a look at our website. We have courses available for your education on National Electrical Code, dealing specifically with PV, storage, and other topics, microgrids. So I encourage you to take a look at that and see if we might be able to help you out on some of your education needs on our website. And then finally, if you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from people. If there's something you want to hear about a different topic, let us know what that topic might be. If you have questions or comments on this specific video, would love to hear from you on that. So thanks a lot. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you on the next Code Corner.